The howling winds carried dust and desperation across the barren plains of Wyoming Territory in 1874. But no sound was more haunting than the quiet weeping of Zara Whitley as she collapsed against the wooden fence of the Crowley ranch, her emaciated body too weak to carry her any further. Her once beautiful face was gaunt, cheekbones protruding beneath skin stretched taut from months of near starvation, and her clothes little more than rags now hung from her skeletal frame like tattered flags of surrender. "Get up, you lazy good-for-nothing, Mrs." Crowley's shrill voice cut through the morning air as she stormed across the yard, a wooden spoon gripped tightly in her gnarled hand. "The chickens need feeding, the eggs need collecting, and you're lying about like a dying dog." Zara tried to push herself up, her thin arms trembling with the effort. At 23, she had once been vibrant and strong, but 6 months as a servant in the Crowley household had reduced her to this pitiful state. Her parents' deaths from cholera had left her destitute, forcing her to take the first position offered, a decision she regretted every waking moment. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Crowley," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I felt faint. I'll get to my duties right away." Faint. The older woman sneered. "It's that lazy blood in you. My husband was too kind taking you in, and this is how you repay us, by shirking your responsibilities." Mr. Crowley was no kinder than his wife. The elderly couple had taken Zara in as unpaid help, promising room and board in exchange for her services. What they failed to mention was that board meant scraps from their table when they remembered to leave any, and room meant the dirt floor of a storage shed. "Your laziness is costing us money," Mrs. Crowley continued, prodding Zara's ribs with the spoon. "No food until all your chores are done today. Maybe hunger will motivate you to work properly." As Mrs. Crowley stomped back to the house, Zara fought back tears. Hunger was her constant companion now. She hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days, and the last meal had been nothing but a crust of stale bread and a cup of watery broth. The Crowleys ate well: chicken, beef, fresh bread, and vegetables from their garden while she slowly wasted away. With trembling hands, she gathered the chicken feed and made her way to the coop. The simple task felt monumental in her weakened state, but fear of Mrs. Crowley's wooden spoon, which left welts that lasted for days, drove her forward. As she scattered feed for the chickens, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Squinting against the bright morning sun, Zara could make out a rider approaching the ranch. Visitors were rare at the isolated Crowley property, located a good 15 miles from the nearest town of Promise Creek. The rider approached steadily, and as he came closer, Zara could see he sat tall in his saddle, his broad shoulders squared beneath a worn leather vest. A dark Stetson shaded his face, but she could make out a strong jaw peppered with stubble. His horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, trotted confidently up to the fence line before coming to a halt. "Morning, miss," the stranger called, his voice deep and smooth like river stones. "This the Crowley place?" Zara nodded, suddenly conscious of her appearance: matted hair, filthy dress, and bare, dirt-caked feet. "Yes, sir," she managed to reply, her voice cracking from disuse and thirst. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height. He tied his horse to the fence post and approached, removing his hat as he did so. Startlingly, blue eyes met hers, and for a moment, Zara forgot her misery in the face of such unexpected kindness. "Name's Yates Armstrong," he said, extending a hand before quickly withdrawing it, seeming to sense her discomfort. "I've got business with Mr. Crowley about some cattle." Yates Armstrong was 30 years old, with the weathered look of a man who'd spent his life under the open sky. His hands were calloused from years of ranch work, his skin tanned by the relentless sun. But unlike many of the rough men Zara had encountered in the territory, there was a gentleness in his eyes that made her want to trust him immediately. "Mr. Crowley is in the house," she said, gesturing weakly toward the main building. "I can fetch him for you." As she turned to go, a wave of dizziness overcame her and she stumbled. Yates reached out, catching her arm before she could fall. "Whoa there," he said softly, concern etching his features. "You all right, miss?" The warmth of his hand on her arm, the first gentle human contact she'd felt in months, nearly undid her. "I'm fine," she lied, blinking back tears. "Just clumsy." Yates frowned, taking in her skeletal appearance, the dark circles beneath her eyes and the bruises on her exposed arms. "When's the last time you ate something proper?" he asked, his voice low so it wouldn't carry to the house. Zara looked away, ashamed. "I need to get Mr. Crowley," she said, avoiding the question. Before she could move away, Yates reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth-wrapped package. "Here," he said, unwrapping a thick slice of bread slathered with butter and honey. "I packed this for my journey, but I reckon you need it more than I do." The sight and smell of the food made Zara's stomach clench painfully. She hesitated, knowing that accepting food from a stranger went against everything she'd been taught about propriety. But hunger won out over decorum, and with shaking hands, she accepted his offering. "Thank you," she whispered, taking a small bite and closing her eyes as the sweetness flooded her mouth. It took all her willpower not to devour the bread in one desperate gulp. "Eat slowly," Yates advised, his expression darkening as he watched her savor each small bite. "Gets ugly if you eat too fast on an empty stomach." The sound of the front door slamming made Zara jump. She quickly hid the remaining bread in the folds of her skirt as Mrs. Crowley's voice rang out. "What's all this lollygagging about? Who are you talking to out there, girl?" Yates turned, placing his hat back on his head and stepping forward to intercept Mrs. Crowley before she could reach Zara. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat. "Yates Armstrong. I've come to discuss some business with your husband regarding cattle." Mrs. Crowley's demeanor changed instantly, her scowl transforming into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Armstrong, we've been expecting you. Please come inside. I'll have the girl prepare some coffee." Yates glanced back at Zara, who had resumed her chicken feeding duties, head down and shoulders hunched. "That would be appreciated, madam, but I wouldn't want to trouble your servant. She seems occupied with important tasks." "Nonsense," Mrs. Crowley said dismissively. "Zara's just lazy. Always looking for excuses to avoid honest work." "Girl," she barked. "Finish with those chickens and come make coffee for our guest." Zara nodded meekly, not meeting Yates's eyes as she hurried to complete her task. Yates followed Mrs. Crowley to the house, his jaw clenched tight as he took in the stark contrast between the well-fed, prosperous-looking woman and the half-starved girl tending to the chickens. Inside the Crowley home, everything spoke of comfort and prosperity. A fire crackled in the hearth despite the mild spring weather, and the smell of roasting meat filled the air. Mr. Crowley, a portly man with a balding head and suspicious eyes, sat in a leather armchair smoking a pipe. "This is Mr. Armstrong, dear," Mrs. Crowley announced. "He's come about the cattle." Mr. Crowley stood, extending a hand. "Heard you were coming, didn't expect you so soon." The men settled into business discussions while Mrs. Crowley bustled about, laying out a plate of freshly baked cookies. Zara entered silently through the back door, preparing coffee with practiced efficiency despite her weakness. When she brought the steaming cups to the table, Yates noticed the tremble in her hands and how carefully she kept her distance from Mrs. Crowley. "Your coffee, madam," she murmured, setting down Mrs. Crowley's cup first, as was clearly expected. "About time," Mrs. Crowley snapped. "Now go finish the laundry. It should have been done hours ago." As Zara turned to leave, Yates spoke up. "Madam, if I might ask, your servant looks unwell." "Is she sick?" Mrs. Crowley's face pinched with annoyance. "She's perfectly fine, Mr. Armstrong, just naturally lazy. Some people aren't built for honest work, you understand." "Took her in out of Christian charity after her parents died," Mr. Crowley added, puffing on his pipe. "Ungrateful thing. Eats our food, sleeps under our roof, and still can't manage to complete a day's work without complaining or falling ill." Yates sipped his coffee slowly, his eyes following Zara as she slipped out the back door. "Indeed," he said neutrally. "Christian charity is a rare virtue these days." The business discussion lasted another hour, during which Yates learned that the Crowleys were looking to expand their modest cattle operation. They needed someone to drive a small herd from Texas, and Yates's reputation as an honest cattleman had reached them through mutual acquaintances. I'll pay fair wages, Mr. Crowley said, naming a sum that was slightly below the going rate but not insultingly so. Yates nodded thoughtfully. I'll need to see the land where you plan to graze them first, and I'll want to discuss the route. Texas fever's been a problem for northern herds. As they talked, Yates kept one eye on the window, where he could occasionally spot Zara struggling with a large basket of laundry, hanging sheets that seemed to outweigh her by several pounds. When the business discussion concluded, Yates accepted an invitation to stay for lunch, more out of a desire to observe the situation further than any real interest in the Crowleys' company. The meal was substantial roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie, but Zara was nowhere to be seen. "Your girl not joining us?" Yates asked casually as Mrs. Crowley served the pie. Mrs. Crowley's lips thinned. "Servants eat after their work is done, Mr. Armstrong. It's the proper way of things." "Of course," Yates agreed smoothly. "I've always found, though, that workers maintain their strength better with regular meals. Makes for more efficient labor." Mr. Crowley grunted. "You sound like one of them labor reformers from back east." Yates smiled slightly. "Just practical ranch management, sir. A weak horse can't pull a plow." After lunch, Yates insisted on touring the property alone, claiming he wanted to get a feel for the land. In reality, he was looking for Zara. He found her by the creek that ran behind the property, washing clothes on a rough wooden board. Her movements were mechanical, as if she were functioning on instinct alone rather than conscious thought. "Miss Whitley," he called softly, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. She looked up, fear flashing across her face before recognition set in. "Mr. Armstrong." "Can I help you with something? Actually, I thought I might help you." Yates reached into his pocket and pulled out a napkin-wrapped bundle. "Managed to slip some food from lunch, roast beef and bread." Zara's eyes widened, darting nervously toward the house. "I can't if they catch me." "They won't," Yates assured her, setting the bundle on a flat rock beside her. "I told them I'm surveying the property. Take your time eating, I'll stand watch." Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at the food, then back at him. "Why are you doing this?" Yates's expression softened. "Let's just say I've seen enough injustice in my time to recognize it when I see it." He turned his back to give her privacy as she ate, keeping his eyes trained on the path back to the house. "How long have you been with the Crowleys?" Between careful bites of food, Zara told him her story, how her parents' deaths had left her alone and destitute, how the Crowleys had offered her a position as a domestic servant, promising fair treatment in exchange for her labor. "The first month wasn't so bad," she admitted, savoring the last morsel of bread. "But then Mr. Crowley's business took a downturn. They started blaming me for their misfortunes, saying I brought bad luck. The food came less often, the work increased, and when I couldn't keep up because I was so hungry. They called you lazy," Yates finished for her, his voice tight with controlled anger. Zara nodded, wrapping the empty napkin and placing it on the rock. "I tried to leave once, about 3 months ago. Made it to the main road before Mr. Crowley caught up with me on horseback. Said I owed them for room and board, that I couldn't leave until my debt was paid. But they never tell me how much I owe or how my work is counting against it." Yates turned to face her, his blue eyes stormy. "That's not employment, Miss Whitley. That's indentured servitude at best, imprisonment at worst." "It doesn't matter what it's called," Zara said, her voice hollow as she returned to her washing. "It's my life now." "Thank you for the food, Mr. Armstrong. You should go before they wonder where you are." But Yates didn't move. Instead, he knelt beside her and placed a gentle hand on her arm. "What if there was a way out? Would you take it?" Hope flickered in her eyes before quickly dying. "There isn't." "There might be," Yates said carefully. "I need a cook for my trail crew. I'm driving cattle up from Texas in a month's time. It's hard work and rough living, but you'd be paid fair wages and fed proper meals." Zara's hands stilled in the water. "The Crowleys would never let me go." "They might if it was part of our business arrangement," Yates said thoughtfully. "I need to negotiate terms with them anyway if I offer to include your debt in our deal." "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Zara asked, searching his face for hidden motives. Yates held her gaze steadily. Because no one deserves to be treated the way they're treating you, and because I believe every person has the right to their dignity." For the first time since he'd met her, Zara's face showed something other than fear or resignation, a tiny spark of hope. "You really think you could convince them?" "I'm a fair hand at negotiating," Yates said with a small smile. "Though I should warn you, trail cooking isn't easy work. We'd be on the move for weeks, sleeping rough, dealing with whatever weather comes our way." "But I'd be free?" Zara asked, the concept seemingly foreign to her now. "Free and fairly paid," Yates confirmed, "and fed properly, I promise you that." Zara looked down at her raw, red hands, then back at the Crowley house looming in the distance. "I'd work harder than anyone you've ever seen," she promised. "I'm not lazy, no matter what they say." "I know that," Yates said softly. "Anyone with eyes can see you're working yourself to death here." A shout from the direction of the house made them both start. Mrs. Crowley was calling for Zara. "You'd better go," Yates said, standing quickly. "I'll handle the Crowleys. Just be ready to leave tomorrow morning if I can arrange it." "Tomorrow," Zara whispered, looking panicked at the sudden timeline. "The sooner the better," Yates replied grimly. "You don't look like you can survive much more of their Christian charity." Zara gathered her washing quickly, her movements more energetic than before. "Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Even if it doesn't work, thank you for seeing me." As Yates watched her hurry back toward the house, laundry basket balanced precariously on her hip, he felt a surge of protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. In his 30 years, he'd seen plenty of hardship and cruelty, but something about Zara Whitley's quiet endurance touched him deeply. Back at the ranch house, Yates found Mr. Crowley on the porch, smoking his pipe and watching the sunset with the satisfied expression of a man who believed the world was ordered exactly as it should be. "Crowley," Yates said, dropping the formal Mr. deliberately. "I've made my decision about your cattle proposal." The older man raised an eyebrow. "That's so? Didn't expect you'd decide so quick." Yates leaned against the porch railing, deliberately casual. "I'm prepared to accept your terms with some additions of my own." "Such as?" Crowley asked, suddenly wary. "I need a cook for my trail crew. Your girl Zara, I want her services included in our deal." Crowley nearly choked on his pipe smoke. "The girl, what would you want with her? Useless thing can barely stay on her feet." "Nevertheless," Yates said firmly, "those are my terms. I'll bring your cattle at the agreed price, but Zara Whitley comes to work for me, her debt to you considered paid in full." Crowley's face darkened. "Now see here, Armstrong, that girl owes us a considerable sum for her keep." "She's not part of any cattle negotiation." "How much?" Yates asked bluntly. "Pardon? How much does she owe you? Name your price." Crowley hesitated, clearly unprepared for such directness. Yates could almost see him calculating how much he could reasonably demand without revealing the exploitation for what it was. $200, Crowley finally said, "for 6 months of room, board, and the clothes on her back." It was an outrageous sum, more than a skilled cowhand would make in that time, but Yates didn't flinch. "I'll give you 50, which is generous considering the state she's in. Any jury would agree she's been worked nearly to death with minimal sustenance." "Are you threatening me, Armstrong?" Crowley demanded, rising from his chair. Yates didn't move, but something in his steady gaze made Crowley sink back down. "Not threatening, just stating facts. $50 and her debt is cleared. She comes with me tomorrow when I leave. Those are my terms for the cattle drive, Mrs." Crowley appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "What's all this about Zara?" Yates repeated his offer, watching Mrs. Crowley's expression shift from indignation to calculation. Unlike her husband, she seemed to recognize when to cut her losses. "Harold," she said to her husband, "Mr. Armstrong is offering good money for the girl, and we'd be rid of another mouth to feed. Besides, Millie Thompson's daughter is looking for a position, and she's much stronger." Crowley looked between his wife and Yates, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he gave a curt nod. $50 and she's yours, but I expect a fair price on those cattle, no gouging to make up for it." "The cattle price stands as discussed," Yates assured him. "I'll have the money for the girl in the morning, and we'll draw up the cattle contract then as well." As he rode away from the Crowley ranch toward the Promise Creek Hotel, where he'd take a room for the night, Yates felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He hadn't come to Wyoming looking for anything more than a business opportunity, but somehow he'd found himself involved in something that felt a lot like destiny. Morning came clear and bright, with a crisp spring air that promised a beautiful day for travel. Yates arrived at the Crowley ranch just after sunrise, leading a packhorse alongside his chestnut stallion. The legal papers were drawn up efficiently, with Crowley eager to secure the cattle deal and less concerned about the girl once the money for her debt changed hands. Zara appeared on the porch as the men concluded their business, carrying a small bundle wrapped in a faded shawl, evidently everything she owned in the world. The change in her demeanor from the previous day was subtle but noticeable to Yates's observant eyes. Though still painfully thin and visibly exhausted, she stood straighter, her eyes clearer and focused on the horizon rather than the ground. Mrs. Crowley emerged from the house, thrusting a worn leather shoe at Zara. "Don't forget this. And don't come crying back when you discover honest work is required elsewhere too." Zara accepted the shoe with a quiet "Thank you, madam," her voice neither submissive nor defiant, simply final. Yates approached, taking her small bundle and securing it to the packhorse. "Ready, Miss Whitley?" She nodded, her eyes darting nervously to the Crowleys. "Yes, sir." "Good," Yates said, helping her mount the packhorse. Her hands were cold in his, her body lighter than it should have been as he lifted her onto the saddle. "We've got a fair distance to cover today." With minimal farewells to the Crowleys, they set off down the dusty road, Yates leading the way on his stallion while Zara followed on the gentler packhorse. They rode in silence until the Crowley ranch disappeared from view, at which point Yates slowed his horse to ride alongside her. "First thing we need to do is get some proper food into you," he said, studying her profile. In the morning light, he could better see the woman she must have been before the Crowleys' high cheekbones, delicate features, and intelligent eyes the color of warm honey. "There's a trading post about 5 miles ahead. We'll stop there." Zara nodded, her hands gripping the reins tightly. "Mr. Armstrong, I don't know how to thank you." "Yates," he corrected gently, "and there's no thanks needed. What the Crowleys were doing wasn't right." "Still," she insisted, $50 is a lot of money. I'll work hard to earn it back, I promise." "The money's not important," Yates said firmly. "And you'll be paid fair wages for your work, same as any other member of my crew. That $50 bought your freedom, not your servitude to me." Zara looked at him with confusion, as if the concept was entirely foreign to her. "I don't understand." "You will," Yates assured her. "For now, let's focus on getting you healthy again. Can't cook for a trail crew if you can barely stand." The trading post was a welcome sight after their morning ride. A sturdy log building with a wide porch, it served as store, post office, and gathering place for the scattered ranches and homesteads in the area. Yates helped Zara dismount, noting how she swayed slightly on her feet after the unaccustomed exercise of riding. Inside, the post was well stocked with provisions, tools, and dry goods. The proprietor, a burly man with a magnificent beard, greeted Yates warmly. "Armstrong. Heard you were in these parts. What brings you to my humble establishment?" "Supplies, Joe," Yates replied, guiding Zara to a small table in the corner. "And a meal for the lady and myself, if your wife has anything cooking." Joe's eyes flickered to Zara, taking in her emaciated appearance and shabby clothes. To his credit, his expression remained neutral. "Martha's just pulled a batch of biscuits from the oven, and there's ham and beans on the stove. I'll tell her you're here." While they waited, Yates made a list of items they would need for their journey south to meet his trail crew in Texas. Zara sat quietly, her eyes taking in every detail of the store, from the barrels of flour and sugar to the shelves lined with canned goods and tools. "Have you been a cattle driver long?" she asked finally, her voice still soft but steadier than before. Yates looked up from his list. "Since I was 16. Started as a wrangler, worked my way up. Now I contract for drives and put together my own crews. It's a good life if you don't mind the dust and the long hours. And you need a cook for your crew?" "Every drive needs a good cook," Yates confirmed. "The work's hard, but it's the cook who keeps morale up." Good food makes for happy cowboys, and happy cowboys make for a successful drive. Martha, Joe's wife, appeared with 2 steaming plates of food biscuits swimming in gravy, thick slices of ham, and a generous helping of beans. Zara's eyes widened at the sight of so much food, but Yates noticed she waited until Martha had left and he had begun eating before tentatively picking up her fork. "Eat slowly," he reminded her. "Your stomach needs time to remember what food is." Zara nodded, taking small, deliberate bites. "It's delicious," she murmured after a moment. "I'd forgotten what real food tastes like." As they ate, Yates explained more about the work ahead. His trail crew was gathering near San Antonio, preparing to drive 2,000 head of cattle north to Wyoming. The journey would take approximately 2 months, depending on weather and river crossings. The cook's job is to rise before dawn, prepare breakfast, pack up the chuck wagon, drive ahead of the herd to the next campsite, and have dinner ready when the men arrive, Yates explained. "It's long days, but you'll have help from a wrangler for the heavy lifting." "I can do it," Zara said, determination flashing in her eyes. "I'm stronger than I look, or I will be once." "Once you're properly fed," Yates finished for her. "Which reminds me, we need to get you some proper clothes and supplies before we head south." After their meal, Yates helped Zara select several practical items: 2 sturdy dresses, undergarments, a warm coat for the changeable spring weather, sturdy boots, and toiletries. Zara protested at each addition to their purchases, clearly uncomfortable with his generosity, but Yates was adamant. "Consider it an advance on your wages," he said when she tried to refuse a brush for her tangled hair. "A trail cook needs to be properly equipped, same as any other crew member." By the time they left the trading post, the pack horse was laden with supplies, and Zara was dressed in one of her new outfits, a simple blue dress that hung loosely on her thin frame, but was infinitely better than the rags she'd arrived in. Martha had insisted on helping her wash and comb her hair, revealing that what Yates had taken for a nondescript brown was actually a rich auburn when clean. "You look like a new woman," Yates commented as he helped her mount her horse, careful to keep his tone light and respectful. Zara touched her clean hair self-consciously. "I feel like one, thank you." They traveled steadily for the next week, covering good distance each day but stopping frequently to allow Zara to rest. Yates was careful to ensure she ate regular meals, watching with satisfaction as her strength gradually increased. They camped under the stars most nights, with Yates maintaining a respectful distance and always giving Zara privacy for her personal needs. On the 4th night, as they sat by the campfire after a simple dinner of bacon, beans, and coffee, Zara surprised Yates by asking about his past. "You know everything about me," she said, wrapping her new coat tighter against the evening chill. "But I know almost nothing about you except that you drive cattle." Yates poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the night sky. "Not much to tell. Born in Texas to ranching folks, lost them both to fever when I was 14, worked cattle ever since. No family at all." Zara asked softly, "Had an older brother. He went to fight for the Confederacy and never came home." Yates's voice was matter of fact, but Zara detected the old pain beneath his words. "After that, I made my own way, found I had a knack for cattle and for managing men. Built a reputation as someone who delivers on his promises." "Is that why you helped me?" Zara wondered. "Because you made a promise to yourself?" Yates considered this, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. "Maybe. Or maybe I just couldn't stand seeing someone treated that way when I had the power to do something about it." "The Crowleys aren't the only ones who treat workers badly," Zara pointed out. "There must be hundreds of people in situations like mine. You can't save them all." "No," Yates agreed. "But I could save you." The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to examine too closely. After a moment, Yates changed the subject, telling her about the trail crew they would be joining: 20 men from various backgrounds, most of whom had worked with him before. "They're good men, mostly," he assured her. "Rough around the edges, but respectful. They'll treat you properly or answer to me. As the days passed and they traveled further south, crossing from Wyoming into Colorado and then New Mexico Territory, Zara grew noticeably stronger. Regular meals and rest worked wonders, and though still thin, her face filled out enough to reveal the beauty that starvation had obscured. More importantly, her spirit revived. Yates discovered she had a quick mind and a quiet sense of humor that emerged gradually as she began to trust that her new situation was real. By the time they reached Texas 2 weeks later, Zara had begun insisting on taking over the cooking at their campsites, practicing for her upcoming duties. Yates found himself looking forward to these meals, not just for the increasingly tasty food, but for the quiet conversations they shared as dusk fell. "Tell me about the cattle drive," Zara requested one evening as they neared San Antonio. "What should I expect?" Yates leaned back against his saddle, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "We'll be moving about 15 miles a day if conditions are good. The chuck wagon travels ahead to set up camp and prepare meals. You'll work closely with Cookie, that's Jacob Miller, our current cook. He's staying on for this drive to train you, then retiring to be with his daughter in St. Louis." "Is he a good cook?" Zara asked, nervousness evident in her voice. Yates chuckled. "He makes the best biscuits in Texas and the worst coffee west of the Mississippi." "The men tolerate the coffee because of the biscuits," Zara smiled, her face transforming in the firelight. "I make good coffee," she offered. "My father taught me. He said bad coffee was an insult to the beans that gave their lives for it." "Then you'll already be ahead of Cookie in the men's estimation," Yates said, enjoying her rare smile. The cattle camp outside San Antonio was a hive of activity when they arrived. Tents dotted the landscape, cowboys moved purposefully between corrals and supply wagons, and the air was filled with the sounds of men shouting, cattle lowing, and horses nickering. Zara's eyes widened as she took in the organized chaos, but Yates noted with approval that she sat straighter in her saddle, facing the challenge head-on. A tall, lean man with a gray-streaked beard approached as they dismounted. "About time you showed up, Armstrong," he drawled. "Was beginning to think you'd forgotten about 2,000 beeves waiting on your orders." "Foreman's privilege, Taylor," Yates responded with a grin, clasping the man's hand. "How's the herd looking, fat and sassy? We've got good stock this year." Taylor's eyes shifted to Zara, curiosity evident in his weathered face. "Frank Taylor, meet Zara Whitley," Yates said. "Miss Whitley's our new cook in training. Miss Whitley, this is Frank Taylor, best trail boss in Texas and my right-hand man." Taylor tipped his hat politely. "Madam." "Welcome to the outfit. Cookie's been complaining about needing help, so you're a sight for sore eyes." Before Zara could respond, a bellow rang out from the direction of the chuck wagon. "Is that Armstrong I hear? Get over here, you cattle-thieving coyote, and tell me why I'm feeding 20 hungry men with equipment that belongs in a museum." Yates laughed, guiding Zara toward a massive wagon where a corpulent man with a bald head and florid complexion was wielding a wooden spoon like a weapon. "Cookie," Yates greeted him. "Still terrorizing cowboys with that spoon, I see." "Someone's got to maintain discipline," Cookie retorted, his scowl transforming into undisguised curiosity as he spotted Zara. "This my replacement, Lord Almighty Armstrong. She's nothing but skin and bones." "What am I supposed to do with her?" "Teach her everything you know," Yates said firmly. "Miss Whitley's had a rough time, but she's stronger than she looks and eager to learn." Cookie surveyed Zara with a critical eye. "Can you cook, girl?" "Yes, sir," Zara replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I learn quickly," Cookie grunted. "We'll see. First lesson starts now. Those potatoes won't peel themselves, and we've got 20 hungry men expecting supper in 2 hours." As Zara moved to follow Cookie to the work area, Yates caught her elbow. "You don't have to start right away," he said quietly. "You've been traveling hard for weeks." "I want to," Zara assured him, a new confidence in her voice. "This is why I'm here." Yates watched her go, noting how she squared her shoulders before diving into her new duties. Pride swelled unexpectedly in his chest, pride and something warmer that he wasn't quite ready to name. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation as the final arrangements for the cattle drive were made. Zara threw herself into learning from Cookie, absorbing his knowledge about cooking for large groups over campfires, managing supplies, and organizing the chuck wagon. Though Cookie was gruff and demanding, Yates noticed he treated Zara with gruff respect, especially after tasting her coffee. "Girl makes coffee like an angel," Cookie admitted grudgingly to Yates on the third evening. "Might have to poison her before the boys decide they prefer her cooking to mine," Yates grinned. "Too late for that." I saw Johnson lingering around the wagon after breakfast, hoping for seconds on those hot cakes she made. Cookie harumphed, but Yates detected a hint of pride in the old cook's expression. "She's got good hands," Cookie conceded. "Quick learner, too. Might make a decent trail cook after all, once she puts some meat on those bones." The cattle drive set out 5 days after Yates and Zara's arrival, with 2,000 longhorns stretching in a seemingly endless line across the Texas plains. Zara, now officially Cookie's assistant, rode on the seat of the chuck wagon, learning to manage the team of oxen that pulled the heavy vehicle while Cookie shouted instructions and colorful commentary. Yates, as the contractor in charge of the entire operation, rode up and down the line, overseeing the cowboys and resolving issues as they arose. But he made a point to check on the chuck wagon regularly, ostensibly to discuss the day's progress with Cookie, but increasingly to exchange a few words with Zara. He found himself looking forward to these brief interactions, the way her eyes lit up when she mastered a new skill, her quiet determination as she tackled the physical demands of her role, the surprising moments of humor that emerged as she grew more comfortable. The bruised, frightened woman from the Crowley ranch was transforming before his eyes into someone vibrant and compelling. 2 weeks into the drive, disaster struck in the form of a sudden thunderstorm that spooked the herd. The resulting stampede lasted nearly an hour and left 2 cowboys injured, one with a broken arm and the other with a nasty gash on his leg that required immediate attention. Zara, who had been preparing the evening meal when the stampede began, immediately converted part of the chuck wagon into a makeshift infirmary. By the time Yates arrived with the injured men, she had clean water boiling, bandages torn from spare shirts, and a mixture of whiskey and herbs ready for cleaning wounds. "Put him here," she directed as Taylor and another cowboy carried in the man with the leg wound. "Johnson, sit on that crate and don't move that arm." Yates watched in amazement as she calmly cleaned and bandaged the leg wound, then skillfully splinted Johnson's broken arm, all while issuing clear instructions to Cookie about adjusting the evening meal to accommodate their delay. "Where did you learn to do that?" Yates asked later, after the injured men had been settled and the rest of the crew fed. Zara wiped her hands on her apron, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. "My mother was known for her healing skills back home. She taught me what she knew." Yates handed her a cup of her own excellent coffee. "You're full of surprises, Miss Whitley." "Zara," she corrected him with a small smile. "After all this time, I think you can use my given name." "Zara," he repeated, liking the way it felt on his tongue. "You did good work today." "Those men are lucky you were here." "It feels good," she admitted, sipping her coffee, "to be useful, to be valued for my skills." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of the growing connection that had been building since that first day at the Crowley ranch. Yates found himself wanting to reach out to touch her face or take her hand, but he restrained himself. She was still healing, still finding her footing in this new life. The last thing she needed was unwelcome attention from the man who'd rescued her. Instead, he simply said, "You are valued, Zara, by everyone here." As the drive continued northward, crossing into Indian Territory and then into Kansas, Zara's confidence grew alongside her physical strength. She gradually took over more of Cookie's duties, proving herself capable not only in cooking but in managing supplies, treating minor injuries, and even resolving disputes among the cowboys who quickly came to respect her quiet authority around the chuck wagon. Cookie watched her progress with gruff approval. "Girl's a natural," he told Yates one evening as they shared a rare moment of quiet while the crew entertained themselves with cards and harmonica music. Got a head for planning and hands that know their business. Crew respects her too, which ain't always the case with a woman on the trail. She's earned it, Yates said, his eyes finding Zara across the campsite where she was mending a shirt for young Riley, their newest cowhand. More than earned it, Cookie agreed, following Yates's gaze. Seen how you look at her, Armstrong? Yates stiffened. Not sure what you mean, Cookie snorted. Known you 15 years, boy, never seen you moon over a woman like this. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it. It's not like that, Yates protested, though without conviction. She's been through hell. Last thing she needs is her employer making advances. Maybe, Cookie said thoughtfully. Or maybe what she needs is to know she's seen as a woman, not just a cook or a charity case. Yates pondered Cookie's words over the following days as they pushed the herd through Kansas and into Nebraska Territory. The spring weather had turned warm, bringing with it blooming wildflowers that dotted the prairie like colorful stars against a green sky. Several times, Yates noticed Zara pausing in her work to gather these flowers, arranging them in a tin can on the chuck wagon's preparation table. My mother loved wildflowers, she explained when she caught him watching her one afternoon. Said they were God's way of showing that beauty can thrive anywhere, even in the harshest conditions. Your mother sounds like a wise woman, Yates said. Zara nodded, a touch of sadness in her smile. She was. I wish you could have met her. Tell me about her. Yates suggested, sitting on a nearby crate and inviting Zara to join him during this rare moment of downtime. As the afternoon sun bathed the camp in golden light, Zara shared stories of her parents. Her father, a schoolteacher with a passion for literature. Her mother, a gentle woman known for her healing skills and quiet strength. They had come west seeking opportunity, establishing a small school in a growing Colorado town before the fever took them both within days of each other. They taught me to find joy in small things, Zara said, twirling a purple wildflower between her fingers. To see beauty even when life is difficult. I forgot that at the Crowleys. It's coming back to me now. I'm glad, Yates said simply. Zara looked at him then, really looked at him, her honey-colored eyes searching his face. I never properly thanked you, did I, for what you did that day? There's no need, there is, she interrupted gently. You didn't just bring me bread that day, Yates. You brought me back my dignity when I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have any. Something about the way she said his name, soft and intimate in the golden light, broke through Yates's careful restraint. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he reached out and covered her hand with his own. You never lost your dignity, Zara, he said quietly. The Crowleys tried to take it, but it was always there, waiting for you to reclaim it. All I did was offer you a chance. Her fingers curled around his, warm and sure. You offered me much more than that. The moment hung between them, fraught with possibility, until Cookie's bellow for assistance broke the spell. Zara squeezed Yates's hand once before rising to return to her duties, but something had changed. A barrier had fallen, leaving both of them aware of the deepening connection between them. As the drive continued northward, these moments of connection multiplied, shared glances over the evening campfire, brief touches as they passed supplies between them, conversations that stretched longer into the evening after the rest of the crew had retired. Yates found himself riding near the chuck wagon more often, ostensibly to discuss the drive's progress, but really to hear Zara's voice, to see her smile. The crew noticed, of course. Trail hands were observant by nature and naturally disposed toward good-natured ribbing. Young Riley was the first to voice what they were all thinking, approaching Yates one evening as they made camp along the Platte River. Boss, he said, nervously twisting his hat in his hands, some of the boys were wondering when you're gonna stop making eyes at Miss Whitley and just kiss her already. Yates nearly choked on his coffee. That's none of your business, Riley. Yes, sir, that's what I told him, Riley agreed hastily. But they sent me to tell you that, well, we all think Miss Whitley's just about the finest lady any of us ever met, and if you don't stake your claim soon, Johnson says he's gonna ask her to marry him when we reach Wyoming. Johnson's arm is barely healed, Yates growled. He'd be wise not to risk breaking the other one, Riley grinned, sensing he wasn't truly in trouble. So you are sweet on her, Yates sighed, knowing denial was pointless. Get back to work, Riley, before I assign you night guard for the rest of the drive. But Riley's words and the implied blessing of the crew stayed with him. That evening, as the men sat around the campfire swapping stories and singing trail songs, Yates found himself watching Zara more intently than ever. She had filled out during their weeks on the trail, her figure softening into graceful curves, her skin taking on a healthy glow from the outdoor life. More than that, she carried herself with confidence now, laughing openly with the cowboys and contributing her own occasional stories to their evening entertainment. She belonged here, Yates realized. Not just on the trail, but in his world, in his life. Cookie, observing Yates's thoughtful gaze, nudged him with an elbow. Stop thinking so hard, boy. You're liable to hurt yourself, Yates chuckled. Just considering my options. Options, hell, Cookie snorted. There's only one option when a man looks at a woman the way you look at her, and she looks back the same way. And what way is that? Yates asked, genuinely curious about what the old cook had observed. Cookie's expression softened. Like you've both been wandering lost and finally found your way home. The next day, as they followed the Platte River westward, Yates made his decision. That evening, after the crew had been fed and most had retired to their bedrolls, he approached the chuck wagon where Zara was making preparations for the morning meal. Walk with me, he asked quietly. Zara looked up from her work, surprise evident in her expression. Now, it's getting dark. Not too dark, Yates assured her. The moon's nearly full. I thought you might like to stretch your legs after being on the wagon all day. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, wiping her hands on her apron before removing it. Just let me tell Cookie. They walked in comfortable silence away from the camp, following the river's edge where silvery moonlight danced on the water. The night was warm, filled with the chirping of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. When they were far enough from camp to ensure privacy but still within sight of the fires, Yates stopped beneath the spreading branches of a cottonwood tree. It's beautiful here, Zara said, gazing out at the moonlit prairie. So vast and open. That's what I love about this life, Yates admitted. The freedom of it, the endless sky above you, new horizons every day. Does it ever get lonely? She asked, turning to face him. Always moving, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. Yates considered this. It did sometimes, before you, he said simply. In the moonlight, he could see her eyes widen, her lips parting slightly in surprise. Yates. I'm not good with fancy words, Zara, he continued, taking a step closer to her. But these past months, getting to know you, watching you grow stronger and happier each day, it's changed something in me, changed everything, really. Zara's breath caught, but she didn't back away. Changed how? I always thought my life was full enough with the trail, the cattle, the crew. Never felt like I was missing anything vital. Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished, and took her hand in his. Now I can't imagine going back to that life without you in it. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yates nodded, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was a green cowhand facing his first stampede. I'm saying I love you, Zara Whitley. I think I started falling for you that first day when you took bread from my hand and looked at me with such gratitude and dignity despite everything you'd endured. Tears welled in Zara's eyes, silver in the moonlight. I never thought. After the Crowleys, I didn't think anyone would ever see me as anything but damaged goods. You're not damaged, Yates said fiercely. You're the strongest, most resilient person I've ever known. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life reminding you of that fact. Zara's free hand came up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with wonder. Are you asking me to marry you, Yates Armstrong? I am, he confirmed, covering her hand with his own. Though I should warn you, a cattleman's wife doesn't have an easy life. There's long separations during the drives, rough conditions, and no guarantees except my promise to love you every day of my life. A smile bloomed across Zara's face, transforming her in the moonlight. I've had ease and security before living in my parents' home. And I've had cruelty and deprivation at the Crowleys. What I want now is a life with meaning, with purpose, a life with love. She stepped closer, eliminating the last space between them. Yes, Yates, my answer is yes. Joy surged through him, bright and overwhelming. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a gentle kiss. Her arms wound around his neck as she responded with surprising passion, and Yates pulled her closer, deepening the kiss as the moonlight bathed them in silver. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Yates pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't have a ring," he admitted, "but when we reach the next town, I'll get you one." "I don't need a ring," Zara assured him, "just you and this life we're building together." They returned to camp hand in hand, their new relationship obvious to anyone with eyes to see. Cookie took one look at them and burst into raucous laughter. "About damn time," he declared, slapping his knee. "Boys, pay up. I said they'd sort themselves out before we hit Wyoming." To Zara's astonishment, several cowboys groaned good-naturedly and began digging into their pockets, passing coins to Cookie and a few others. "You were betting on us?" she asked, torn between embarrassment and amusement. "Trail gets boring," Frank Taylor explained with a wink. "Congratulations, you two. It's about time the boss found someone who can put up with his ornery ways." The rest of the crew offered their congratulations, their genuine happiness for the couple evident in broad smiles and hearty backslaps for Yates. Johnson feigned disappointment at losing his chance with Zara, but was among the first to wish them well. "When's the wedding?" Riley wanted to know. "Can we all come?" Yates looked to Zara, leaving the decision to her. "We haven't discussed details yet," she told the young cowhand. "But I can't imagine getting married without all of you there. Your family now." The drive continued northward with renewed energy, everyone aware they were not just moving cattle to market but escorting a bride and groom to their wedding. When they reached Cheyenne, Wyoming Territory, 3 days ahead of schedule thanks to good weather and high morale, Yates took Zara into town immediately to select a ring and speak with the local minister. The wedding took place 2 days later, after the cattle had been successfully delivered to their new owner. Zara wore a simple white dress purchased from Cheyenne's finest dry goods store, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Yates, looking uncomfortable but handsome in a new suit, waited for her at the altar of the small white church. The entire trail crew scrubbed clean and dressed in their Sunday best, filling the pews behind him. Cookie, surprisingly emotional for such a gruff man, walked Zara down the aisle in place of her father. "Proud of you, girl," he whispered as he placed her hand in Yates's. "You've come a long way from that half-starved thing that showed up in San Antonio." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, with Yates and Zara exchanging simple vows promising to love, honor, and cherish each other through whatever challenges life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the trail crew nearly raised the church roof. The celebration afterward, held at Cheyenne's best hotel courtesy of Yates's cattle profits, lasted well into the night. There was dancing and drinking, storytelling and laughter, with Zara and Yates at the center of it all, their happiness radiating outward to encompass everyone present. "What happens now?" Zara asked quietly as they shared a rare moment alone on the hotel's veranda, the sounds of the party continuing inside. "Another cattle drive, more wandering." Yates took her hand, running his thumb over the simple gold band that now adorned her finger. "I've been thinking about that. I've saved most of my earnings over the years, enough to buy a decent spread. Maybe it's time to put down some roots, like you said." Zara looked at him in surprise. "You'd give up the trail, for me, for us," Yates corrected her. "I'm not getting any younger, and the idea of a home, a real home, with you sounds better than another 1,000 miles of dust and cattle." "Where would we settle?" Zara asked, excitement building in her voice. "There's good land available near Promise Creek," Yates said. "Not far from where we met, ironically enough, far enough from the Crowleys that we wouldn't have to see them, but close enough to good grazing land and a growing town." Zara's eyes shone with happy tears. "A home of our own," she breathed. I never thought I'd have that again. A home and maybe someday a family, Yates added, pulling her close, if that's what you want. It's everything I want, Zara assured him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him soundly, as long as it's with you. 1 year later, Yates and Zara stood on the porch of their newly completed ranch house, watching the sun set over their land. The Rocking-A Ranch, as they'd named it, was modest but growing 100 head of quality cattle, a sturdy barn, fertile grazing land, and the comfortable 2-story house that Yates had insisted on building to Zara's specifications. Hard to believe how much has changed in a year, Zara mused, leaning against her husband's solid strength. Yates wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his other hand resting gently on her rounded belly where their first child grew. Good changes, he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. The best, Zara agreed, covering his hand with her own. From starvation to this abundance, from being called lazy to being respected for my work, from loneliness to so much love. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The evening breeze carried the scent of baking bread from the kitchen, Zara's bread, made from her mother's recipe, that had become famous throughout the region for its perfect crust and tender crumb. You know, Yates said thoughtfully, I brought you bread that first day, but you've been feeding me ever since, not just with food, but with your strength, your courage, your love. Zara turned in his arms, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. And you, Yates Armstrong, brought me dignity when I needed it most. Everything else, the home, the happiness, this baby grew from that one act of kindness. As the stars multiplied overhead, the soft glow from their windows spilling out onto the porch, Yates and Zara Armstrong held each other close, grateful for the journey that had brought them together and the life they continued to build day by day with love and dignity as its foundation. In the distance, a calf bawled for its mother, and somewhere in the house, a timer chimed to signal that the bread was ready. Ordinary sounds of their extraordinary life together, a life neither could have imagined on that fateful day when a starving servant girl and a kind-hearted cattleman first met at a cruel ranch in Wyoming Territory. I love you, Yates whispered against Zara's hair. More than I ever thought possible. And I love you, Zara replied, her voice strong and sure. Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows. Hand in hand, they walked back into their home, leaving the door open to welcome the cool evening air and whatever new blessings tomorrow might bring to the life they had built together from bread and dignity, courage and love.